MJ Mike Sewell asks, of many stunning covers, issue 23 to 35 are up there as favorites. How did the painted covers for Cerebus happen? What prompted the decision? When did you know you had this amazing skill set? It's really not that amazing, which was one of the reasons that I only did it for a while. I've got my Cerebus covers book here, so I thought I'd go through them one at a time. 23 actually isn't painted. 23 has got a little bit of watercolor on it. Most of it is marker, and the reason that it's marker and in color would have mostly to do with my affection for Bernie Wrightson's marker work that he did. Harry Kremer had a Superboy pitch piece that Bernie Wrightson had done for DC, pitching them on Wrightson doing Superboy miniseries or something like that. And it's all done in marker. Harry bought it at a Cosmicon in Toronto, and it's the most amazing thing. You look at it and you go, yeah, I know that that's marker because nothing really looks like markers, and it's just spectacular. But it's spectacular because it's Bernie Wrightson, and he knew exactly what he was doing with those colors. So this is me on 23 attempting to do what I saw Bernie Wrightson doing, something that obviously is marker with maybe some watercolor mixed in, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good for a kid that age, but it's definitely no threat to Bernie Wrightson. Same thing with 24. That's almost all marker, and same thing. It's even Bernie Wrightson's palette, saying this is how Bernie Wrightson would do the underlighting with the blue shaded part of Cerebus lit from below, the solid blacks, and then the Cerebus gray just put on there with cool gray marker, and even the shadow on the wall of the plant. It's like this is something that Bernie Wrightson would do, but when Bernie Wrightson would do it, it would be absolutely brilliant. When Dave Sim does it, it just looks kind of sloppy. But it's not terrible, but it's really not great. 25, that is watercolor. That was me finding a watercolor set that I think was in a box of cereal, where it's just, here's your free watercolor thing. And I just started monkeying around with it at the breakfast table with a couple of scraps of art paper, watercolor art paper, and going, actually, this is really good. I'm intimidated by the idea of doing watercolors, but let's actually go ahead and do a watercolor cover instead of a marker cover this time. And that's really what I did. 26, same thing. That's almost all watercolor. 27 is all watercolor. 28 is all watercolor. 29 is all watercolor. 30 is all watercolor. 31 is all watercolor. 32 is all watercolor. Actually, pretty close to how you're supposed to be doing watercolor. I'm getting to that part of the story. 33 is watercolor. At some point, I think when Denny and I went down to Poughkeepsie to visit Richard and Wendy Peeney, I think I brought along a couple of the originals, and Wendy looked at what I was doing and said, "What kind of paint is that?" And I said, "It's watercolor." And she said, "Well, you're doing it wrong. That's not how you do watercolors. You're doing it as if it's gouache or acrylic, and you don't do that. You don't use watercolor just straight out of the tube. If you want to paint something straight out of the tube, do gouache or do acrylic," which was incredibly embarrassing. That not only had I been doing watercolors wrong, but I had been doing them and foisting them on the buying public. So 34 was the first time that I actually tried to do watercolors the way Wendy described the right way to do watercolors, which is you build up a series of glazes. You water them down, and it's mostly water, a little bit of color, or half color, half water, but that's why they call them watercolors. Watercolor is a big element of that. The best on the 34 cover is probably the banknotes and the sort of pebbled wall background is there. That's how you're supposed to use watercolors, and that's actually a pretty good use of watercolor. When it comes to Elrod's tunic and cape and Cerebus, I'm doing the same thing. It's like I don't have the patience to build up glazes one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other. I want to put a blue in that this is what the blue looks like, and this is what I'm sticking with, and then I want to do a darker blue over top of that for the shading. And it's like, well, okay, you can do that, but don't do it with watercolor. Do it with acrylic, or water down the acrylic a little bit. But stop trying to make watercolors do what watercolors won't do. 35 is probably the closest to classic watercolor, and it's just way too washed out from my point of view. I don't like doing watercolors because when I do watercolors, the way you're supposed to do watercolors, they end up just looking all washed out, as if somebody took the color cover and took 70% of the color out. And it's like, I hate that. I really, really don't like that. So that was why that was pretty much the last watercolor cover. Then I did 36, going back to using the markers, and it's like, okay, this is where I got onto this bus. Let's just forget it. Let's forget what I don't know how to do, which is painting, and let's go back to what I do know how to do, black and white covers with separations on top of them. So here, this is the color that I want, because I looked in the separations book, and this is, if you use this much magenta and this much cyan, and this much yellow, and this much black, it gives you this kind of brownish red. That's what I want. I want, there's a color in my mind, and I want it to look as close to that as I can possibly get it on the printed cover. And the only way I can do that is by looking in the separations book and saying, there, that's the red. How much magenta is this? How much cyan? How much black? How much yellow? And that was what I did from then on until Gerhard was here. It's like, here, you seem to understand this whole watercolor mystery thing, and I also knew about the Dr. Martin watercolor dyes. I never owned any, but I knew that a lot of the guys used those. So I said, well, there's a thing called Dr. Martin watercolor dyes. Get some of those and see what you think of those. And Gerard definitely took to watercolor dyes like a duck, like the proverbial duck to water, and that's what he did almost all of his covers with. So when you're saying, when did you had this amazing skill set? I still don't have that skill set. Have you done any painting since? I did do a Too Much Coffee Man cover for Shannon Wheeler when he was doing the magazine size Too Much Coffee Man. One of the first things that I did after Cerebus 300 was done, and I went, okay, I don't have a Cerebus comic book to draw and write monthly anymore, so I really don't have the excuse to not do a watercolor painting properly, building up the glazes one at a time until I have very vivid colors that are these series of glazes. And so that's what I'm going to do. So I did the war cover for Shannon Wheeler with Too Much Coffee Man in military garb, obviously in Afghanistan at the time period, and the mullah of too many damitases pictured on the wall behind him. And I think it probably took me at least a week to do it, going, I really don't like doing it this way, but I'm not going to do any shortcuts. I'm going to build up the glaze, build up the glaze, build up the glaze. And that pretty much did it for me and watercolor covers. Until I decided to do the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #8 cover, and I went, okay, let's try doing another painted cover. And I've been halfway through that cover for a long time, and it's just I don't know what to do next. I'm figuring out different ways to build up glazes. Stop trying to mix too much color. Mix smaller amounts of color. So I've been saving my plastic Diet Coke caps. Going, okay, this is plastic. You'll be able to mix color in this, but because it's a Diet Coke bottle cap, you can't mix too much color in there. Maybe I can force myself to come up with a turtle's green where there's just this much of the turtle's green, because I only got one turtle to do, and I'm building up glazes on him. Let's try and get the intensity of the glaze a little more intense than it actually is. But it's not my idea of a good time. If you want to see Dave Sim in a bad mood, come and see Dave Sim when he's working on a watercolor for some obscure reason, because he knows watercolors always put his nose out of joint, and that will be up ahead sometime before the January Turtles 8 Spectacular Kickstarter. I got to get that cover done, so I'm waiting until I'm ahead on my work and in a particularly good mood, so that I can completely kick the crap out of that good mood doing this Turtles cover, and hope it goes for a lot of money at Heritage Auctions. That was one of the theories, was people will pay more for color than for black and white. So better do a colored Turtles cover and put that with your two black and white Turtles cover. But I'm glad, Mike, I'm glad you like them. I'm glad you consider them stunning covers. What do I know? I mean, it's one of those covers go for a lot of money. I mean, the number 33 cover, which I think I donated to a charity, and then made its rounds until it ended up at Heritage Auction. that was the most expensive Dave Sim Cerebus piece that ever sold at auction, whatever time period that was. That's going back a few years, but it was thousands of dollars. So it's like, man, what a weird universe that we live in, where somebody who has absolutely no idea how to do watercolors does watercolors completely wrong, and it sells for more money than virtually every other watercolor that any other watercolor artist knows how to do watercolors has done probably in the last 25 years. And it's like, well, that's the world we live in.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and then we had a late question. Just about to do the wrap on that one, and you faxed one through today. That doesn't happen a lot, where you get a last minute question. But
it was one of those. It came in when I was at work, and I'm like, I can send this to Dave. There was also a question on Margaret's notebook post for today. I'm like, that's going to wait till July.
Okay. All right. Last minute question from Nadab Art. Hi, Dave. Starting on page 92 of Flight, we see Couture thinking in diamond-shaped thought balloons. That usually indicates telepathic communication, but it's almost exclusively women who can do that in the series. Cerebus is also capable of it for a while, but I'm more curious as to how Mr. Couture seemingly has that ability. Thanks, Nadab. And we're gonna start with the name Nadab. Is this guy's name actually Nadab Art? Because that's a very, very funny metaphysical reference that either he's done it intentionally, in which case, whoever you actually are, Nadab, nice round of applause from Dave Sim. And if his name is actually Nadab Art, then it's like, wow, now we're talking on a real God level scale of that's a very clever metaphysical witticism. I say that because Nadab is Aaron's eldest son. This all ties in together. Just be patient with me here. Aaron's eldest son, who was intimately present at Mount Sinai in the second book of Moshe, 24:1, also called Exodus, and later a priest in the second book of Moshe, 28:1. He transgressed the law. That takes us to Exodus 39 with his brother Abihu in offering, quote, unholy fire, unquote, to God, for which they both died. And it's interesting. I got that from my New Bible Dictionary. Unholy fire is not the way the King James translated. It's strange fire. And they didn't offer it to God. They offered it to YHWH. You wouldn't offer fire to God. You would offer fire to, the Prince of Fire. But that gets into only Dave Sim thinks that way. They offered strange fire before the YHWH. Looking up the term strange as it applies in that passage in Strong's Concordance, the term is zur, Z-H-Z-U-W-R or Z-U-W-R, which is a primary root in Hebrew, which is something that's always going to put you on full alert when you find a Hebrew term that is a primary root in the Torah. That's a form of emphasis, and what it means is to turn aside. Literally, something that's foreign, strange, profane, and is also used relative to committing adultery. So it's a very interesting passage. I then went and said, okay, now I have to explain the strange fire before the YHWH. And what you discover is this is part of the instructions of this is second book of Moshe, chapter 30, Exodus, in other words, 30:34. And the YHWH said unto Moshe, take unto thee sweet spices, stacked and onycha and galbanum, sweet spices with pure frankincense, of each shall there be a like. And the King James interpolates weight, a like weight. But it doesn't say that. It says a like. So no idea what the YHWH is talking about, a like. And thou shalt make it a perfume, a confection after the art of the apothecary, tempered together, pure, holy. And thou shalt beat of it very small. And again, the King James interpolates some, so that it says, and thou shalt beat some of it very small. But it doesn't say that. The YHWH is saying, and thou shalt beat of it very small, and put of it before the testimony in the tabernacle of the congregation, where I will meet with thee. It shall be unto you most holy. So what happens is, now I'm looking for the strange fire. Anyway, in the 7 to 10, I'm supposed to have it here somewhere. This is really irritating. Okay, I don't. But anyway, when they offer the strange fire to the YHWH, I wasn't aware of the fact that I guess the best thinking among Talmudic scholars is that this violated the idea of where you're supposed to offer the strange fire and when you're supposed to offer it, and that they didn't create the fire where they were supposed to create it. They brought it from somewhere else, or they brought it at the wrong time. But anyway, they get quick fried by the YHWH. This fire comes out and incinerates Nadab and Abihu for offering strange fire before the YHWH. And obviously is a jaw-dropping moment for all of the Hebrew people. And Moshe tells Aaron, who, Nadab and Abihu are his sons, and he's just seen them completely incinerated by fire. Don't mourn, don't pull out your hair, don't tear your clothing, don't react to this in any way, because obviously the YHWH is really, really steamed. Let the Hebrew people mourn for your sons. You keep as straight a face as you can, and the same thing with your two remaining sons, because you still got two more sons. You don't want to do anything that's going to get them incinerated. My inference is that this is an extension of the pagan tabernacle that actually originated in Egypt, which is what the YHWH is getting the Hebrew people to build. And this was part of, okay, now that we've got the badger skins dyed blue and purple, and all of the taches and the ivory and whatever else, the basic Vatican giant pile of loot thing. Now that we've got this happening, we also need the incense, because that's another pagan thing. Is you've got to have clouds and clouds of this stuff that make the place of pagan worship smell specifically like this. Not just smell really good. This is, as far as I can see, the mistake that Nadab and Abihu made was going, I tell you what, let's experiment with these ingredients and see if we can get something that smells a little different. And it's like, you don't want to do that with the YHWH, because like YHWH is fine-tuning everything to exactly what is in conformity with what the YHWH needs in terms of, here's the badger skins, here's how long the curtains are supposed to be, here's how far apart they're supposed to be, here's the distance between this and this, all the things that I made fun of in latter days of here's what the tabernacle looks like. And it's just pages and pages and pages describing what the tabernacle is supposed to look like. Complete paganism. So it was, no, this has to be put a stop to, and as emphatically as possible. Do not mess with the tabernacle. Do exactly what the YHWH tells you to do with the tabernacle, because if you don't, your firstborn and your secondborn children are going to get reduced to a little pile of ashes, because I want you to understand how important this is. And everybody picked up on that real good. This is really, really important, which is why it's interesting that the person asking the question here is Nadab Art, because essentially that's what I'm doing, is by Dave Sim saying, okay, I'm the only person on the planet that believes this, but I tell you, this fits the story a heck of a lot better than your idea that God and YHWH are the same being. I'm offering strange fire before the YHWH. And it's like, yeah, granted, I've taken that as a given since I started writing about my take on the YHWH, and no question about it. I could get incinerated at any moment, but that hasn't happened so far. I don't know if it's just something where, okay, you get X amount of time to completely finish what it is that you have to be saying. But man, oh man, are you asking for it? And man, oh man, are you going to get it? So now this ties in with the question that you're asking, Nadab, which was on starting on page 92 of Flight. We could see Couture thinking in diamond-shaped thought balloons. That usually indicates telepathic communication. Right. Now, you have to remember that Flight is the beginning of the last half of Cerebus. So basically what I'm doing is an allegory in Imesh, with Couture devoting his entire life to building this monument, which is effectively the infinity symbol stood on its head. I mean, it's usually the infinity symbol is sideways. This one's vertical, and obviously a macrocosmic construct, particularly when Gerhardt got his turn to do it. It's like, we got to make this look really, really big. It's taking up most of the city of Imesh. And so we're going to have a teeny tiny Cerebus and a teeny tiny Kachor illuminated by torches. And just looking at it today, Gerhardt really knocked that one out of the ballpark. But anyway, the construct is basically the same thing that I'm doing with Cerebus. Cerebus is like a giant infinity symbol. The first half of the book, up to 150, being the male loop on the infinity symbol, and then 151 to 300 was going to be the female loop. And basically what I was doing was saying, okay, I'm just starting my second loop. Kachor is pretty far along on his second loop. Like he's not all the way through, but you'd have to say he's a good halfway through. What happens when you get to that point, halfway or better through your female loop? Does the goddess suddenly make sense to you? Which obviously it has with Kachor. He's completely in tune with I knew as Siren, but as YHWH, in that everything, all he does is think and talk about the goddess, and is obviously, if they're his thoughts, they're his thoughts in quotation marks. Those thoughts are being planted in his head. So I was saying, I don't know. Is that what happened? It's like I've been, ever since Michael Lubert came up with, a matriarchy in Upper Felda, I've got a matriarchy, really? And then, when you move that to the deistic level, going, a goddess, really? You really think that there's a goddess or goddesses? I just can't see that. It's like, well, maybe you have to do your first loop, and as you get through your second loop, you go, oh, goddess, of course, it's a goddess. It's not really God. God has actually been a goddess the whole time. How could I have not seen that? So, and then I thought it was pretty clever. I flipped ahead going, I kept going with this, but anecdotally, episodically, with the structure of flight. And I'm going, where did I get back to this? And I'm flipping through, and it's like, yes, Cerebus appears before Kachor, and Kachor knows exactly what he wants. Wants to ask Cerebus, which is, where did you go when you disappeared? And it's like, Cerebus, no reason to lie. I went to the moon. And it's like, oh, okay, what's life like on the moon? And it's like, there's actually this crazy guy who wanders around in this gray, empty landscape, and all he does is talk and think about the goddess. And even Kachor had to find that funny, going, yeah, okay, so it resonates everywhere. It's like, obviously, the goddess is in control of everything, because not only is it like that here, not only is it like that in Imesh, not only is it like that when you build this giant construct, it's like that on the moon as well. And it's like, well, okay, that seems more than a little nutty to me, and still seems more than a little nutty to me. But then I didn't know how large a construct I was in, where, okay, you thought the first loop was the first half of Cerebus, second loop was the second half of Cerebus, and actually the first loop was Cerebus, like all 300 issues. You didn't know that somewhere up ahead you're going to do The Strange Death of Alex Raymond, which was put together by Ward Green, who thought that he was patronizing Fortuna, the Roman goddess of luck, of fortune. and you have no idea that yes, this is a much bigger story than you ever imagined that you're going to be doing. And I don't know if I'm halfway through my second loop, halfway through Strange Death of Alex Raymond, but it still seems completely crazy to me. It's still no, I can't really see a goddess. I can't really see feminism. I can't see the sort of stuff that feminists come up with. You know, climate change seems nutty to me. But there you go. There's the long answer to Nadab's question, and I hope that Nadab takes that in the spirit in which it was intended.
Okay. I mean, I'm just thinking about, I mean, in flight, that's part of the chess game, isn't it?
Yes. That's, Kajor was one of the bishops, I think.
Yeah.
So it's, well, what is a bishop? You know, a bishop is a hierophant. A bishop is a priest. A bishop is the person who interprets scripture, interprets mystical events, and says, "Here, this is definitively what this is." I think we're coming to the point as a civilization where that's not really happening anymore. It's like, as much as anyone has the good faith to be a good Anglican or a good Presbyterian or a good Catholic or a good Orthodox Jew, there's just way too much going on in terms of interpretation, in terms of, well, okay, this could be this. Well, up until now, we've said, or the entrenched priesthoods have said, this is this, that's not that, and you better agree with us, or we're going to burn you at the stake, or break you on the rack, or put you in prison. That's a good way to persuade somebody that this is the only proper way to look at this thing. But it's like, well, we don't do that now. So now it's getting to the point of, well, even if you don't want to interpret Scripture in your own mind at variance with how Scripture is being interpreted, you're probably still going to do that. You can say, I won't do that, but you have a modern mind. You have a modern mind that says, no, there's a whole spectrum of viewpoints. So you're going to be shopping and picking and choosing from a variety of different things, and deciding what it is that they mean, from the microcosmic to the microcosmic. Why was Nadab and Abihu's strange fire strange? What made it strange? And like I say, reading between the lines, I think the Levitical priesthood and the Talmudic scholars over the last number of centuries, over the last millennia, when you're talking about the Torah, when you're talking about Jews, have said, okay, these are the two things that, from a Levitical standpoint and from a Talmudic scholar standpoint, these are the two greatest likelihoods. Well, I don't owe those in my own mind. I don't owe those two entities deference. So I say, well, I think it was strange fire because they changed the ingredients, and whatever it was, whatever incense is to the YHWH, the apex pagan construct creation, that was a definite no-no, because incense wasn't a small deal, or wasn't thought by that apex presence to be a small deal, which is why, obviously, frying somebody down to complete ashes is, well, if you want to get across, don't do that. That's a good way to get across. Don't do that. So we're coming up on 3 hours here, Matthew.
I was gonna say, I think this might be the longest one we've done.
It's getting close. If it's not, it's a contender. So much appreciation to you for your patience, and the viewers for their patience in a lot of them actually even just listening to this. Wow, listening to this sort of stuff for 3 hours. My mind is a playground. So thanks for coming to Dave's Playground for 3 hours.
As I say, whenever somebody mentions something and I find it and post it on like the Facebook group, it's my job.
There you go. Okay, all the best to Paula and Janice Pearl and Natasha, as always. And we'll talk to you again, God willing, next month.
Yes, we will. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Dave.
Thanks. Take care, Matt.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
And now, for the members of the Little Orphan Aardvark Secret Society, a special message from Aardvark for you, members of the Little Orphan Aardvark Secret Society. Set your decoder wheels to A equals copyright. The message from Aardvark to you, remember Aardvark's depending on you, is 7E space M copyright 6E space D E diamond space 429 infinity diamond I space 4 skull and crossbones space 2E copyright AM space 9 skull and crossbones 5 space copyright D skull and crossbones 5-4 space 9 skull and crossbones 5-2 space A copyright 2Q3 space 7 copyright 2 copyright diamond 49 space 9 skull and crossbones 5-2 space A copyright 2Q3 space 7 copyright 2 copyright diamond 49 space infinity 3 space copyright D skull and crossbones 5-4 space 4 skull and crossbones space E80 infinity 2 E space skull and crossbones 2 space M copyright 3 space E80 infinity 2 EV Pisces space 4 skull and crossbones space 30E copyright spade space 4 skull and crossbones space copyright space heart infinity 6E space A534 skull and crossbones club E2 space 3 copyright heart E3 space 2E0 2E3E diamond 4 copyright 4 infinity 6EC space 0 2E33 space Taurus space diamond skull and crossbones 7 Pisces space 4 skull and crossbones space DE space 2E club skull and crossbones 6 EV space S2 Skull and Crossbones Club, space, Skull and Crossbones 52, space, A, copyright, heart, space, Heart Infinity 34, space, 02E33, space, Gemini. Remember, Aardvark is counting on you